What's up, horror fans? Pete is here from the Lassercast, and I'm with my good friend and co-host, Danny Torkel, Dr. Zayas God. We are covering RoboDoc episode 2, which just dropped on SCREAMBOX, the documentary that makes you believe that RoboCop is the greatest movie ever made. And Danny, I rewatched RoboCop this week, and I kind of maybe believe that at this point. Have you watched it again since the last time?
I told you last time. The episode 1 was so good that I not only watched RoboCop, but I binged the whole trilogy. I think it was last Saturday, and I absolutely love the original. Is a legitimate all-time classic. Gets better with age. Sadly, the themes are still very prevalent. Whereas the sequels are fine. I think there's kind of a law of diminishing returns, but they are fun. There might be a drop in quality, but they're still fun enough. This episode was a lot of fun too. Opening with the Wrecking Crew was such a great idea because I feel like that was the one thing in the first episode that I was like foaming at the mouth for, was to see Kurtwood Smith and Ray Wise and the gang, the whole Wrecking Crew, come together and talk. And I think it was a brilliant decision to kind of hold off on that for episode 1, and then to give them their flowers and basically make them the focus of at least the first half of this second episode. The episode is called Verhoeven's Mantra, which is basically, according to different people, some form of "we need more fucking blood."
Yes.
And nobody brings more blood, aside from RoboCop, than the Wrecking Crew in this movie, led, of course, by Clarence Boddicker. I've been walking around my house since about 6:30 last night, just going, "Can you fly, Bobby?"
Yes. I rewatched RoboCop I don't know, 2 days after we filmed, and I kept saying, "Can you fly, Bobby?" Like over and over again. And it's so funny, man. Rewatching RoboCop, like when I was a kid, I saw it, I think, probably with my mom, and I think she covered my eyes a few times because a couple scenes. Then I remember kind of my cousins would watch it, or they'd have it on tape and I would see it. But it was never a movie that I would rewatch over and over again the way that I would some other movies. Like I remember I rewatched Return of the Jedi all the time. That's why I was a huge Star Wars fan. But RoboCop was never one that I personally would rewatch. And I always kind of had this view of it as it was maybe a little bit of a B movie, but it had some good parts. I thought it wasn't like Terminator or these other movies that I held in such high esteem. But then when I rewatched it, I was like, holy shit. Every scene is good. And there's really nothing sort of cringeworthy or oh, this didn't age well. Everything is fucking good in this movie.
Yeah. Everything is really good in this movie. I mean, they spent time in this episode on the actor who does the "I'll buy that for $1" and the making of those scenes, and those scenes are never shown live. It's This movie filmed episodes of a TV show to be on in the background, and they talked about this in episode 1 with, I think it was the Lasertron TV show that Alex Murphy's son watched, and how they filmed specific, instead of just putting the TV on in the background, they actually filmed things to go onto the TV. And the things that are on TV become these lines that are just embedded into pop culture now. If you walk down the street and go, "I'd buy that for $1," at least somebody in your age range is going to go, "RoboCop?" They're going to get it.
Yes.
My favorite thing in this episode was two things. It was the entire opening 15 to 20 minutes going through the Wrecking Crew actors, seeing how much fun that they had. They felt like even now that they're and they probably are, and it's Hollywood, but it felt like they're this big group of friends. I love that there was a specific note in the production meeting that they should be like an array of different. It shouldn't be all black guys. It shouldn't be all white guys. It should be like different actors with different ethnic backgrounds. And they have Steve Minnow, I think, is one of them. Jesse. I forgot his. I didn't take good notes for this episode.
Oh, that's okay. Let me see if I can pull them up. Oh wow, there's.
I know Ray Wise, because Ray Wise has done a lot of movies in the horror space, and he's been like a fairly popular actor for 35 years. And of course, Kurtwood Smith,
Jesse Goins.
Jesse Goins, there you go.
Yeah. Jesse Goins is Joe Cox. That's the one who's like, does it hurt? Does it hurt? He's got that hyena laugh. He's so good in this movie. He like stands out.
And the way that they talk, like how none of like a lot of their like most memorable characteristics were not in the script. Like it just said laugh. He laughed in that way that makes his character so memorable.
Exactly.
The way that the other guy says, hey, Paul, can we like moonwalk out of this scene? And like, I'm just going to smash some Coke into my face on the way out. And he was like, oh yeah, do that. Like that was not in the script. The whole, that was like a Kurtwood Smith thing that he just thought of. And like, those are the moments that we remember as fans. I always thought Kurtwood Smith Clarence Boddicker is one of the great underrated villains in movie history, because he's one of these guys who he looks like, and he even made a joke, Kurtwood Smith, how he was potentially going to be cast as Dick Jones, and he thought he would be better as like the swarmy businessman. He's got his glasses on. He kind of looks like a guy who would carry a briefcase and wear a suit. And here he is wearing like, fatigues, leather jacket, carrying huge guns and committing some of the worst violent acts that you'll ever see. And for people our age who later on grew up watching that 70s show, if they had somehow skipped RoboCop, it's like a fucking rude awakening to see Red, the angry dad in that 70s show, as one of the meanest, nastiest villains in cinema.
Yeah.
It really, it's such a great performance. I love that kind of archetype of like the kind of nerdy guy or nerdy character who turns out to be like the real evil supervillain.
Yes.
And I feel like they've tried to do that in other movies, and they haven't done it with as much success. Speaking of that 70s show, I'll give you you might get where I'm going here. The son on that 70s show,
Topher Grace.
Yeah, who was also really nerdy and kind of geeky. He ends up playing the main human villain in, I think, Predators.
Yes.
And it didn't work for me. It didn't. He didn't have the presence that Clarence, gravitas that Kurtwood Smith did. So it's a tough character to pull off. Like we're used to seeing villains. I'll give you for me. You brought up Terminator. Robert Patrick in Terminator 2, because when you've seen Terminator, you're expecting Arnold, the biggest human on Earth, to be the villain.
Right.
And then when he's the good guy, and the guy he's facing as the lead antagonist is a guy half his size, you're like, this isn't going to be a fair fight. I mean, Arnold's going to kill this little guy. And of course, the special effects and the technology of the T-1000 made him so imposing. But Robert Patrick's performance in that movie also was great, and he's so intimidating. Yes. And so, like for the little guy, bad guy, I think it's a great character.
Yeah, Kurtwood Smith is like fantastic, and he kind of has like an inverse of Bryan Cranston's career, right? Because Bryan Cranston starts out on Malcolm in the Middle, this goofy show. He's the dad, and then he becomes one of the most iconic villains, Walter White in Breaking Bad. Here, Kurtwood Smith starts out as one of the most iconic villains and then becomes the goofy dad later on. But Kurtwood Smith has a career that's connected to Star Trek, another gigantic sci-fi franchise. He's in like Star Trek 6, which is so good. He's the president of the Federation in that movie. I know he's done voice acting for like some of the Warner Brothers cartoons, like some of the kind of early Justice League cartoons from the Tim verse or whatever that are so good. He's just fantastic in this movie, and this documentary does a fantastic job of pointing out all the different ad-libbed parts. And there's little small details, like you mentioned how they're dressed. They kind of have this kind of paramilitary type of clothing, but then they add little details, and they have like a scarf on and stuff. And it's a testament to the movie, right? Because you see him in his sort of paramilitary criminal gear. Then towards the end, he meets with Dick Jones and he's dressed up in a suit, So he's kind of doing that two sides of the criminal aspect to him. He very much reminds me of Stringer Bell. Do you know who that is? Have you ever watched The Wire?
I didn't watch The Wire, no.
Okay. It's the guy, fucking the guy who's like in God damn it. The amazing British black actor who's like so...
Idris Elba?
Thank you. Yes. Idris Elba is Stringer Bell. And he kind of has this great dynamic of like kind of be like this legit guy and like blend in with the suits and stuff, but then also being this like cold-hearted criminal. And they have that vibe with Kurt, his character in this movie too. So it's just so great. Like every fucking person in this movie is good. And this documentary is just showing how like Paul Verhoeven just decided to let them roll with it. And it shows how it works. I'm sure in other movies, there's times when people are allowed to ad-lib and it just kind of doesn't bring anything. But in this particular movie, it's just they roll the dice every time with the chances they take, and it works every time.
That's one of the things that I thought about watching this about Verhoeven is, as much as he appears to be like a very contentious, a very excitable director who's not afraid to get into people's faces and like, almost come to blows with his actors.
Right.
What I find interesting is that a lot of these people, both in front of and behind the camera, follow Verhoeven in their career. Mm-hmm. And Verhoeven has a lot of actors who came back and worked with him again. Ronnie Cox, of course, goes from playing Dick Jones to being Cohagen in Total Recall. Mm-hmm. Rob Bottin, who, again, like we talked about in episode 1, it appeared that there might have been some contention behind the set with him because he's the one designing RoboCop, and Verhoeven keeps coming in and making changes and putting like dicks on the RoboCop model. Rob Bottin went and worked on Total Recall as well, as well as I think another, maybe even parts of Starship Troopers. And Verhoeven, even Peter Weller, who like the first time he said he went into the RoboCop suit, he was like ready to quit. He came back and did the sequel. Now Verhoeven didn't direct the sequel, but Weller must have loved the character enough to come back for at least one movie.
Yeah.
By the way, do you know who directed RoboCop 2? Interestingly,
wait, I think I do know this actually. Isn't it fucking like Lawrence Kasdan?
You're very
or
close.
Irvin Kershner?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Empire Strikes Back. Irvin Kershner.
Okay, I think because Lawrence Kasdan, he wrote it, right? That's who it is. He wrote Empire Strikes Back. That's why I always get their names mixed up.
Kershner directed it. So yeah, and part 3 is Fred Decker, who we just talked about in our review of Night of the Creeps.
What a fucking pedigree, right? You have Paul Verhoeven for the first movie, director of Empire Strikes Back, second movie, director of Monster Squad for the third movie.
Yeah.
That's fucking incredible. I'm really glad you brought up Peter Weller because they talk about the Wrecking Crew for a big portion of this episode. Then they actually talk about when he comes out as RoboCop for the first time and how people react to it. And they talk about little changes there too. One of the suggestions that I can't remember if it was Paul Verhoeven or one of the people on the crew, they talk about putting the plastic over RoboCop and then like kind of unveiling him. They were saying how that made a big difference. They talk about how like when he comes out, you know, they do this thing where you only see like little glimpses of him at first, and then he's behind the screen. I like rewatching the movie. I felt like that was so
I
effective.
think the first like actual view of his head and helmet is actually on a TV monitor as they
Right,
walk by.
right,
But
right.
that whole scene, all I came away from there is just the insane amount of respect I have for VFX people from the 1970s and 80s, because we've talked about this, like we talk about this with Chris and with Brian, how special effects today, you know, with all the advancements in technology, you'll go into a movie today that costs $200 million and you'll be like, what the fuck was that? And I'm not going to mention Ant-Man Quantumania. Oh shit,
Oh.
sorry. You know, but there are movies that I go to today that cost hundreds of millions of dollars to make, and I walk out and I'm just left absolutely perplexed at how, for the money and the technology that exists, how is that the product on the screen?
Right.
And then you go back to 1987 on a $9.95 million budget, and they're doing things with no computer graphics to make it look like there's computer graphics.
Yeah.
Like the way they described how they got the targeting of his vision, and even like the RoboCam with like
Yes.
the double grid.
Yes.
It's unfucking real how they did
Yes.
that. And even watching that movie today, 34 years ago, it looks amazing. It looks
Yes.
real. And as you know, we played video games in the early 80s. Like, that's what it looked like. You know,
Yeah.
like it looked like turning on like a Nintendo that has like a layer of dust on it. And, you know, you get like the pixelated images, or it's just unbelievable what it took. Like, they're talking about how like they literally painted a background black and then drew the crosses on.
Right.
And how does that look better than like $200 million
I know.
VFX today?
Yeah. It's all about the vision. It's all about the person behind the camera. And you have this like visionary, amazing filmmaker. You know, they were talking about that sequence because that's what I love about this documentary is the documentary, the beginning of it sort of is talking about the inception of RoboCop and how they kind of came up with the idea and they started to pull the team together. And now it seems like they're going through the movie sort of like in chronological order. You know, we introduce the wrecking crew. We focus a lot on like Murphy's like just obliteration, and then we show the creation of the actual RoboCop character. And they just focus on that so much, and they do talk about his like vision, how they did that whole sequence. But they show that like Paul Verhoeven was just like such a nut about how to film everything. He always wanted more. He would say to people, "Are you trying to mess up my movie? Are you trying to like sabotage my movie?" And like one of the people pointed out how there's that sequence when they go to throw the cop car keys to the chief, and then RoboCop walks by and he like catches them in his hand.
Thank you.
Right. And they said that they filmed that from like 9 a.m. to like 1 o'clock at night. Just that sequence.
There was also that child actor who said that like they were trying to get like a shot, and he came on the set, and it took so long to set things up that it passed midnight and he no longer could be in the movie because of child labor laws. So they brought him back for the sequel since they cut out his scene.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of the stuff that you're talking about goes to the director of photography, Joseph Vacano. One of the most famous scenes in the movie, RoboCop shooting the guy in the dick. Yeah. And they go into a lot of detail about that specific scene. They actually got the two of the actors from that scene, the woman and like creep number 2. And they're talking about, you know, how nobody puts it in their head that like when you walk at a flat surface, your shadow gets smaller. But it looks so fucking cool that when RoboCop shows up, the shadow gets bigger to make him look so much more imposing. And it's such a stupid camera trick. He just walks backwards into the light, but it's so brilliant at the same time. And, you know, and we talked in the first episode about a lot of the tracking shots and how they would film these kind of like long takes through the police station
Yeah.
using like a different kind of like steady cam camera. Just brilliant stuff all around.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always think of I think it was the Honest trailer, the Screen Junkies Honest trailer for RoboCop, where because Verhoeven always talks about RoboCop being Jesus, and they're like, this movie is an allegory for Jesus, except this Jesus shoots bad guys in the dick.
Dick, yeah, yeah.
Which is one of my. I think that's why the RoboCop Honest trailer is my favorite of the entire Honest trailer series.
Oh, absolutely.
I used to cover the Honest trailer episodes for
Geeks of Doom.
Geeks of Doom, and like every Wednesday I would do like a little mini review and attach the video of the Tuesday release. Those were a lot of fun.
Yeah,
But
hell yeah.
yeah,
And they're still around too.
Yeah.
It's funny, right? Because that sequence when RoboCop starts to go on duty and he goes and he gets the two creeps, he shoots the guy in the dick. There's the hostage situation. First of all, there's that guy in the convenience store where RoboCop shows up for the first time. The guy's shooting him and he's like, "Fuck me!" Right as he's shooting him, right? And he bends the gun barrel. I love that. It's funny because in this documentary they talk about how they can't show that on TV, so they had to like edit what he says. He goes from saying "fuck me" to what does he say instead? He's like,
oh god,
it's something stupid, but it's like he
yeah,
goes from saying "fuck me" a whole bunch of times to something else like
that's like
"forgive me."
when they put Pulp Fiction on TV for the first time. Tarantino actually like made a TV cut where like he had the actors come in and like dub their own lines.
There you go. Yeah, or it's always like in all the Die Hard TV cuts where it's always like he doesn't say "yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker."
Yippee-ki-yay, my friend.
Right. But the reason why I bring up that sequence where RoboCop goes on duty for the first time, I wanted to bring up for 2 points. RoboCop has such an iconic theme. The RoboCop theme is so good. Dun 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 dun. Right, that theme. And I noticed rewatching the movie that you don't hear that theme until he goes on patrol.
Mm-hmm.
So you go through at least 50 minutes of the movie or so, and you don't hear that theme. And then he comes out and he's on patrol. He's driving the car, and that's when you hear it for the first time. And it just hits so well because it's like earned. It's like, oh my god,
that's one of the things that I think David Weiner from all the talks that we've had with him I noticed about the movies in the 80s growing up, and it really carries over from the 70s where every big movie has this just absolutely iconic score or this iconic music that we attach to it. And Basil Palladores' score for RoboCop is fucking amazing, and it's like it's one of those pieces of music that you hear it and you instantly know. It's kind of like the Terminator theme. It's kind of like, the theme.
Batman 1989.
Oh God, Batman 1980. Well, then you're getting into Elfman, but of course, I think I mentioned to you a few weeks ago. I rewatched Batman '89, and when the opening credits start and you just hear the music, I got like instant goosebumps, and I was 7 years old again. I was like, oh,
good.
That was that era, that like that 1980s, late 70s into the 80s. Every movie had this just iconic piece of music with some of the all-time greats, whether it's John Williams, Elfman, in this case, Basil Palladores does an amazing job. I wanted to bring up, I think the actor's name, because we were talking about the Wrecking Crew before, Paul McCrane, I think his name is.
Yes, it is. Absolutely.
Who plays Emil. And, we were talking about how every one of them brought their own thing. It was his idea to do that bizarro beard. He said he just showed up on set and he's like, is this good? Can I do this in the movie? And Paul Verhoeven was like, yeah, go.
Yeah.
And I never realized that he was the like kid in the full body cast in Rocky 2.
Right.
Like,
yeah. Well, I was going to ask you too. Have you ever watched ER? Did you watch ER when it was on?
I watched religiously from when it started until like all the major original cast members started leaving.
Okay, so that's
like in 2000, I went to college, and I think like after that, I kind of stopped watching it. Like once Clooney left and Anthony Edwards left, and all the big cast members, I kind of phased out. But yeah, the opening of it definitely.
Well, so I think Paul McCrane he was on it, right?
Oh
He's
my
that
god!
doctor. He's that doctor that's so mean to Anthony Edwards' wife. Do you remember the British wife that he had?
Yeah, is he the asshole? He's not the asshole guy that gets his arm cut off
He
by
is
the.
the asshole guy who gets his arm cut
Holy
off.
shit!
Yes, yes, yes,
Of
yes,
course he is. Oh my
yes.
god, I fucking hated him so much.
Yeah.
Not only does he get his arm cut off, doesn't he then die when like a fucking he has like the worst luck with helicopters ever.
yeah.
Oh
Yeah,
my
yeah.
god, I can't believe that just blew my mind. And of course he is. Like I'm just amazed at how great everybody looks. I don't know when Eastwood Allen, Christopher Griffiths, and the rest of the filmmakers of this documentary, when they did these interviews, but it feels like they did these interviews in like 2000 because the cast of this movie has aged like fucking fine wine.
Yes,
Like,
agreed.
Paul McCrane looks like he just stepped off set as Emil. Like
Right.
Kurtwood Smith looks exactly the same. Like he could just be Clarence Boddicker again right now.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, even Paul Verhoeven looks good, and the guy's like 80, almost 80 years old, I think.
Yeah, I know. He was around during World War II, and he looks great. Yeah. It's funny, right? Because I stole an image from their promotional campaign, from the RoboDoc promotional campaign. It's a picture where it's like all of the wrecking crew, and then it shows them as the wrecking crew, and it shows them now being interviewed. And it's such a great image. That's what we're going to use for the thumbnail for it. But I agree completely. Like this movie makes everyone look awesome. And it's so good. I wanted to bring up one other point though about when RoboCop comes out. And he does bust Emil. That's like one of his first people that he busts too. But what I was going to say is, I don't think that there's any other. I mean, there's the Superman movie from 1979, right? The Christopher Reeve Superman movie. But really, like your prototypical superhero movies, there's not a lot before RoboCop. And then I was thinking that like RoboCop itself almost seems like the definitive formula for the superhero movies that we watch. Like what we expect to be a superhero movie, I feel like RoboCop is. And I wonder if like everything is sort of based on it. Because like you have this good guy who's maybe like a little bit dorky, who's the main character. Something happens to him where he's like transformed into another character that has powers, right? Then you have the sequence where you reveal the character with his costume. He goes and like busts a couple of random criminals and everyone's sort of in awe of him, right? Then like whatever the problems were, like whatever the main villain was that was in the first act kind of comes together in the final act, right?
It's almost the Stanley Marvel Comics formula of like, random person, doing some random stuff, gets bit by a radioactive spider, blasted with oh god, what did Bruce Banner get blasted with?
Gamma radiation.
Gamma radiation. Agrees to take part in a science experiment. And then they learn to use their powers, and then they go off and bust a few bad guys, or if they're a villain, they go out and kill a few innocents. And then, the character from the beginning who kind of sets everything up, whether it's Norman Osborn or, they end up being the villain at the end. And but this movie, again, it's that idea that it wasn't really a formula in 1987 yet.
Right. And it's interesting, right? Because you brought up Spider-Man, which I 1,000% thought of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man while I was watching RoboCop again. But then as we're talking, I'm thinking about another movie that we love, Darkman. And I was like, Darkman kind of mirrors this too, especially Darkman, because Liam Neeson just gets fucking slaughtered in that too, just like Peter Weller gets slaughtered in this. And then he comes back and gets his revenge on all these iconic criminals. Like, I mean, the Wrecking Crew is more iconic than the villains in Darkman, but they still all have personalities like they do in RoboCop.
It's also similar in the way the villain structure is set up, though, because in Darkman you have a Wrecking Crew of Durant, Larry Drake, and his like gaggle of like henchmen who all have a kooky personality.
Exactly.
But then the overarching villain is the real estate mogul who's trying to like rebuild the city that's in disarray.
Right.
Wow. Now I just want to do a Darkman RoboCop So like I told you last time, like RoboCop, They Live make a perfect
Yeah.
double feature if you want to talk about like movies that point out the true nature of like the Reagan 80s. But
Yeah.
then RoboCop and Darkman is a perfect double feature if like you want to do here's what a comic book movie looked like without any actual like superheroes. Like
Exactly.
yeah.
That's exactly what
And
it is. It's how do you make a comic book movie that's not based on an actual comic, an
yeah.
original for the movie character. Yeah. I mean, dude, wouldn't that actually be a really fucking awesome? We're talking about shared universes, like a shared universe that just had comic book characters that aren't from comics, like RoboCop, Darkman. There's a couple of other ones too, but RoboCop and Darkman always stand out as like
No,
superheroes that didn't start in comics.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, the closest thing I could think of today would be something like, what was Kick-Ass based on a comic?
it is. Yeah,
Okay, what about like Super, the Rainn Wilson movie?
that is
I
not.
think that
That's original.
so that was an original idea. But then there's
J-
also stuff like Shyamalan's Unbreakable.
Yes, that's a good example. That's a good example.
That's an original idea, and
Yep.
that movie when it came out, you know, the bloom was still on the rose for Shyamalan then. But yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah.
Uh, so the only other thing I just wanted to bring up
Sure.
is there a guy who just never seems when people talk about the great special effects, everybody brings up, you know, Rick Baker's makeup effects. You know, he's the first guy to ever win the Oscar for that category for American Werewolf in London. And then of course you got your guys like Stan Winston, you know, Phil Tippett, more recently has gotten his flowers a lot. People like revisiting his stuff, and Mad God was like pretty successful on Shudder. But Rob Bottin, I feel, falls through the cracks a lot.
Yeah.
And I think it has to do with the fact that he's very aloof. Like, I don't think he works as much as the other guys. I think he's kind of like personality wise, he's kind of like I don't want to say he's weird, but he kind of is off on his own thing. Whereas like Rick Baker was at Comic-Con last year and was like signing autographs. He's like that kind of guy.
Yeah.
But they show like when they're doing the Wrecking Crew stuff and Murphy being killed, and you're watching Peter Weller die, and it's not Peter Weller. It's this amazing like full size animatronic Peter Weller body that he crafted. And you look at the movies that he worked on, especially in the 80s, where you go from The Howling, which has, you know, I think a lot of people in recent years have been a lot more favorable of The Howling, and you know the transformation, the werewolf transformations in that movie, which are done almost completely on camera and not in close up the way that the close ups are of Rick Baker's effects in American Werewolf. They're both amazing, but they're just different. Of course, for my money, the greatest practical effects ever in a movie is John Carpenter's The Thing, and everything that Bottin did in that movie. And then the stuff that he does in RoboCop, from creating the freaking suit to these like amazing animatronics of Alex Murphy being killed, just so freaking good. And I almost wish that they I hope in the next couple episodes they keep bringing up more Rob Bottin effects. The next two episodes, the final two episodes, come out the next two Tuesdays on SCREAMBOX, the 12th and the 19th. On the 12th, it's Blood, Sweat, and Steel. And then on the 19th, it's Murphy and the Machine. So
interesting.
This is like what been one of my favorite things. Between this and Ahsoka, it's been a great couple of weeks for like sci-fi action stuff on the streaming channels. But
yes, hey, if you bring up Ahsoka, I gotta like tag that too. I have another channel called Comic Books Transformed, where me and my friend Brian review shows like Ahsoka. So if you guys like my presence, you can come watch me on a weird background too over there on Comic Books Transformed. But yeah, no, I mean, this documentary is great. I don't know if I've actually seen any other documentaries by this team, but I really want to check out that Pennywise documentary. And then I
Well,
mean, you listed a
The
whole.
Pennywise one was super special for me because 1990 is one of the movies that like solidified me as both a horror fan and a Stephen King fan. That movie, I slept with the lights on for 2 months because of that movie, because of Tim
Yeah,
Curry, and everything that went into that movie. And they did such a good job on that documentary.
yeah,
Their other one, the Robert Englund documentary, is freaking great too. It's like a fully encompassing like biography of Robert Englund before and after Freddy, um, and it's just Hollywood Dreams and Nightmares, the Robert Englund story, really great, and I think that's still on SCREAMBOX also.
nice, man.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
glad to have access to it because I'm really digging it. You know, I'm really digging these docs. But yeah, I mean, Danny and I are going to continue to talk about RoboDoc for the next 2 weeks. And then Danny, do you want to talk about kind of like what's on the channel right now? Anything you got coming up?
well, what do we have on the channel right now? We did we have an interview with Dane Elcar, for the director of the new movie, on new sci-fi horror movie Brightwood, which is on VOD right now.
Right.
And we have a full review of that movie. We had Anthony J. Rapino on, a horror author, and he has a YouTube channel called Candy Corn Apocalypse. And we did 40-plus-minute discussion of Night of the Creeps, which is one of our favorite horror movies.
Yep.
I just got some very exciting news in that the New York Comic Con schedule released, and it's going to be a busy couple of days for me when I go to New York Comic Con. There is a lot of awesome horror stuff.
Okay.
They have a Blumhouse panel on Thursday night. They have this Chucky season 3 premiere, and I think they're going to have people from the cast and crew there, like they did last year for season 2. They
Yeah.
have, I don't know if you've ever heard of this guy. He made a few movies in the 70s and 80s. John Carpenter, he's going to be there. Yeah.
Nice. Nice.
And Charlotte and I have we're going to meet him, get a picture and an autograph, but then he also has like a spotlight panel on Friday afternoon. So I have to let my boss know now that I might not be at work that day.
Nice,
And there's a ton more stuff that I'm blanking on. Eli Roth is going to be there with a hour-long preview of his upcoming movie Thanksgiving, which started as a fake trailer during Grindhouse back in, I think, 2007. That's finally coming out 16 years later. I'm so excited. I love Comic-Con. It's my favorite 4 days of the year. And I always, every year I go, every year we've had this channel up, I try to do a bunch of I try to cover all the horror panels, all the horror stuff that I get my hands on. Last year, the Midnight Club with a guy you might have heard of, Mike Flanagan, premiered. And we got to watch the first episode with Mike Flanagan and the cast in the room. So that was awesome. And we had the Chucky season 2 panel last year. So looking forward to this year. Lots of cool horror stuff. So that's coming up in about 5 weeks.
Nice,
really
man.
excited.
I'm jealous. When I lived in New York, right before I moved, I went to a few Comic-Cons like for the years up until I moved, and I really enjoyed them too. I remember I sat in on the panel for Hellboy 2 with Guillermo del Toro, and that was just so great. Yeah. He brought all the
get a ticket, fly in, you crash on my couch for a few days, and we'll go to Comic-Con.
No problem.
I think I might even have some extra passes.
Nice. As you know, working in education, I just have that much money where I could go do that. Piece of cake.
Yeah, we're paid very, very well.
Yes. Well, on
and
that
I'm sure
note,
in Texas you have loads of benefits too. And
yeah, I think we're ranked like 48 out of 50 states for education, so it's good. Yeah. Hey, look at that. We got RoboCop got a little commentary at the very end there. Very nice.
Yeah, there you go. We got into some like commentary about the current state of socio-political affairs. See,
Nice.
RoboCop continues to inspire.
There you go. Thank you, Paul Verhoeven. And thank you guys for watching. We will be back next week for RoboDoc.